season. And what's more definitive about the summer movie season than talking and reviewing a brand new documentary and spending an hour on it? Well, that's exactly what we're going to do tonight. We are talking about Movie Pass, Movie Crash. That is the movie tonight. Brand new Max documentary. Kind of came a little bit out of nowhere. I missed when this thing actually premiered at South by Southwest a few weeks back. It's now on Max, though. It's now streaming on several HBO channels as well. And there is a lot to talk about, and mainly because it's a documentary that directly it was about something that me and Joe not only used regularly, abused regularly, but also was really a stalwart talking point on the original iteration of Sleepless with Steve back on the radio on WONC FM 89. I hope somebody who's working today, appreciates the tag. I added WONC in my tweet for Sleepless tonight. So I hope somebody working the 3 to 6 shift or the 6 to 8 shift now, however they divvy it up now. It's true. It's true. So they're getting paid. They're getting paid to keep that X page open, the Twitter page open, whatever it is. They're getting paid to like and notice that tweet. So now I had to shout out WONC though, because we used a lot of their airtime or a lot of their bandwidth very gingerly back in the college days, because Movie Pass was becoming a weekly story on the show back when the show was 3 hours long. Still don't know how we did that. Back when the show is 3 hours long, Movie Pass found its way into pretty much every conversation, every show on a weekly basis. So to see a documentary about something that, like, it's one thing to remember it like BS High. Like, I remember seeing that Bishop Sycamore game on TV.
Yeah.
It's one thing to remember it, but I'm just like, why the hell's a high school team playing on ESPN? And oh my God, they suck. I remember turning it on for like 2 minutes and I'm like, it's 38-0. My God, it's different. It's different though when you actually like went through it. Thank God didn't invest in it. But Movie Pass is going to be an interesting topic today. It's going to be the star of our show, mainly the documentary Movie Pass, Movie Crash, which I have a lot to say about, and I assume you gentlemen do too. Of course, I got Joe Viso, Dominic Guanzon. Dominic returns after a week sabbatical last week. Dominic, I'll start with you. First things first. Did you get a chance to see Furiosa at all or not?
Dude, I did not. So tonight I'm going to watch the original Mad Max and then watch Furiosa.
Okay.
Not 2 in 1, because that's insane. But yes, I will be doing that this week.
Are you watching the Mel Gibson movie or Fury Road?
No. Fury Road.
Okay.
So
the
I was gonna
fourth
say,
Mad
I'm like,
Max.
that's interesting. You're just gonna watch Mad Max and then go watch Furiosa. All right.
Yeah, I was gonna say that's a little peculiar. So you're watching Fury Road tonight and then going to see Furiosa. Got it.
Yes.
I love it. How are you doing, my friend?
It's summer season, baby. Things are ramping up, but I got a lot of good things. I got a lot of good um, projects on the side. I just launched a new podcast with my former boss, now
I saw that.
Podcast co-host, and we talk about Sonic the Hedgehog. The Archie comic Sonic the Hedgehog is, and I think still is, one of the longest running single line of comics in American history. At clocking in, I want to say 400 and something individual issues, which is insane. Like, for a single run, not even, Action Comics doesn't even do that. Superman or Batman, right? Detective Comics, no, it's all individual. It starts and stops throughout the years. But Sonic kept going for at least, I want to say, 3 decades or so. So we're going to go issue by issue, and we should be done in about 11 years. So we got plenty of content. We calculated it. We should be good. So come and join in on the fun before it runs out.
How have I never? I saw you were doing this. How have I never heard of this though? The Sonic the Hedgehog comic series from Archie Comics.
So the thing with Sonic the Hedgehog is that it's all very fragmented. The TV show, there were like 2 TV shows running at the exact same time in the 90s. And they were both radically different styles from one another. The video games, there's like 6 eras of video games, each of their own continuity, 6, 7, 8. you know. And this comic book, this Archie comics, there's a new comic now that's running as we speak. We'll get to that in the next decade. But this new run, that is its own continuity. Actually, that's tied in with they're finally synergizing shit in the past like 5 years. But Sonic the Hedgehog's been around since the early 90s. So they had a lot of catching up to do. So yes, this specific Archie comics, Archie, their mascot, they're being the Riverdale, the original Riverdale comics and whatnot. But the company Archie, Sabrina the Teenage Witch, etc. But the original or the original Sonic the Hedgehog Archie comics were just their own continuity. That's why you probably never saw it, even if you played the games. So unless you were into Sonic fandom and lore, which I was as a kid, I never got to read the comics because that cost money. But I was in the fandom, right? I was writing fan fiction. I was in the OG early 2000s forums.
I also assume you're reading these online then.
Yes, very much so.
Because these things aren't cheap. I was just looking on eBay. These damn things aren't cheap. I see somebody on Reddit collected all 600 some odd issues.
Yeah. And after literally decades and decades of content of comics, and
these look fun.
We're gonna go through them. It's so funny because the style changes over the literal decades. So,
it looks like it. I just judging by the covers.
Early on, it's like wacky Looney Tunes. There's hardly any continuity, which is fun because when you try to force some kind of logic into them, it makes a really good discussion, even though it's senseless many times. But later on, it gets like epic. It gets like crazy, like some anime epic shit happens. So I've heard. So we'll see. We shall see. But the clips are doing great. Those YouTube shorts, fantastic. They're really fun to make, and they're hits.
The future of podcasting, I think, even too, is niches. It's weird, it's weird little subsets of subsets. That I think
that's how it is now.
I think is fun. I've thought about this, and I don't know where I'd fit it in my schedule, but a buddy of mine suggested to me years ago when he was like, he's like, you could probably do, and he's like, they're not as like dichotomous as you think. He said, you should do a podcast by yourself. And he goes, it's focused on Christian movies and Tyler Perry movies.
You could do that. You could do that and make bank, my friend.
Like, yeah, seriously. Like you talk about like a non-believer reviewing Christian movies and stuff. You know how much hate mail I'm gonna get? You know how much hate mail I'm gonna get? There's no such love like Christian hate. So
I was very, very hesitant to make a podcast that's like, oh, we're gonna talk about this existing piece of content. Like that seems a little cheap. But the thing with that, it's not like hey, here's a podcast talking about The Office. Everyone's seen The Office, right? The Office actors have their own podcast on that stuff. But this is something that, like you said, Steve, even though you probably played some Sonic the Hedgehog, you're aware of the character Sonic the Hedgehog. No one's read, not no one. Hundreds of thousands of people have read this comic, but it's kind of faded into the background, which is crazy because it's been around for, again, literal decades. So that's what attracted me to like commit to doing it. And it's just really fun to hang out.
And people have read them, but how many people have done like a deep analysis of them? That's 100%. The other point. That's the other
which is
point.
Funny because again, we're early on. It's the early 90s and they're doing like basic Looney Tunes shit. So the analysis can only go so far. So we're like inserting politics on top of it. It's great. It's a good time.
How do you
live and online. It's Sleepless with Steve and the Movie Book Club with your host, Steve Pulaski.
Go.
Steve, we're live on YouTube on this Wednesday evening, 6:30 Central Time after a week off last week. We are back talking about Inside Out 2, which is now the third movie post-pandemic that Pixar has graciously released in theaters, and dare I say, the best that they've released in theaters since Onward, which was technically pre-pandemic. We're going to unpack all of this movie, which made $155 million at the box office this week, blew away all of the expectations. So there's a good chance you saw this movie, too, with it making so much money. June is off to a really good month in terms of Bad Boys Ride or Die and Inside Out 2. I'm not going to be the moral oral over here and be like, you know, like original Pixar movies used to make that in an opening weekend, or the fourth Bad Boys movie is making a ton of money in theaters. I'm right now, I want to see theaters succeed. I want to see theaters thrive. I'm not really in the business of critiquing things. I think it's an added bonus that Inside Out 2 is so good and it's making a ton of money too. I know damn well that a movie like Thelma is not going to get a ton of people out to the theaters. Although I just want to say really quick, for you guys, I know you guys are busy and stuff with your own life and everything. Last night, though, Catherine and I was gracious enough to get an advanced screener of the movie Thelma with June Squibb from Magnolia Pictures. Make time for that. That is a really sweet movie. I wanted to watch it back when it was at Sundance, but I couldn't get virtual tickets for it in January, and it's out in theaters as of tomorrow.
It was it was also AMC's unscreened or screen unseen last week, and I originally was going to go to it, and then I got busy with work. I was like, let me back out of it. I only got time to make one movie this week, so I might as well make it Inside Out too.
We don't get those screen unseens out here. When I looked at that, though, I thought, I was going to say, I think we got like two of them. That was about it. When I looked at that one, I thought maybe it would have been A Quiet Place, judging by the runtime and the rating. You know, I thought, so I'm surprised it was Thelma. So that was actually kind of interesting. It's a really good movie. It's got June Squibb in it, who is probably most famous for Nebraska. She was the grandmother or the mother in Nebraska. And she was also recently, she was in Don't Tell Mom the Babysitter's Dead. She's also in Inside Out 2. She's the voice of nostalgia. And she is so good. She's 93 or 94 now. She's 93 when the movie was shot. And it's her first ever starring role. And it's a really well-made movie, basically about a grandmother who falls victim to a phone scam and then, gives up $10,000 in cash. And then the movie is her trying to recoup the money in like light action movie parody style. She's very inspired by Tom Cruise. And it's a very sweet movie. It's a charming movie. And it's also like one that reminds you how we don't really get a lot of movies for like the middle-aged crowd anymore.
Yeah.
It was lovingly made for the director, Josh Margolin, his grandmother, Thelma, who almost fell victim to a phone scam of similar nature. And she was, as of the Sundance premiere earlier this year, the real life Thelma is alive and well at 103 years old.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
I've been having issues with my webcam, so bear with me over here.
I was gonna say, he just dropped that news and then he left. I was like, okay, Steve.
As long as you can hear me, that's fine. I've been having some issues with my webcam, so I apologize there. But no, highly recommend Thelma. If you can get out to a theater, you got some extra time, that's definitely the one I recommend heavily. I was really glad. Shout out to Magnolia, too. I had a small screener issue while trying to watch it, and Magnolia remedied it at 5:30 p.m. on a Tuesday, which was also the night of the movie's premiere. So shout out to Magnolia for exceptional customer service for their critics. But at any rate, though, that's not the movie we're reviewing today. We're obviously reviewing Inside Out 2, and we're also going to do a little follow-up that Variety did. We're going to touch on that with the Blair Witch actors, with Heather Donahue, who I know now, I should have looked this up earlier, I know now goes by a different name, Michael C. Williams and Joshua Leonard. So we're going to talk about that. We were talking about that a couple of weeks ago, about how the Blair Witch actors have really banded together to demand compensation as they're now looking to make another Blair Witch movie using their name, image, and likeness to promote the movie. So we'll touch on that to end the show. Inside Out 2 is the meat of the show today. We will touch on that in just a few short minutes. First things first, Dominic, how are you today?
Busy as all hell. It is summer, baby, and for the past, oh God, like 7 or 8 years now, that's been my life, where summer is busy at work, at my day job, as opposed to where it's, well, I guess that is just normal for a lot of people. But I do have a lot of friends who work in either academia or in places where it's a little easier in summer, but that's not quite for me. And we got a lot of exciting, but also intensive things happening outside, and it'll the heat and humidity just sap the life out of you, but that's okay because we have a water cooler at work, and that's all I care about. I am draining that thing. And it's not just because I'm also taking whey protein to avoid kidney stones. I am a hydro homie here. So please use sunblock, drink water, eat right, say your prayers. All right.
Eat cucumbers.
I do love my cucumbers. That is my number one vegetable. That is my number one vegetable. Number one vegetable is cucumbers. I'm trying to think. Asparagus would probably be my second. That's a vegetable, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say asparagus. Underrated vegetable. One of the most underrated vegetables, radishes, in my opinion.
I don't think I've ever had a radish.
Man, I mean, radish gets too much hate. And I wish somebody would have told me, like, if you remember all the cartoons in the 90s and even like the 80s and stuff, the one thing that kids would not eat was Brussels sprouts. I remember that was a thing on Arthur, that, like, you know, Arthur hated Brussels sprouts.
Yeah.
Fucking Brussels sprouts are good if you make them right. That's one of the worst kept secrets.
Let's just skip to this joke. Can you switch to my slides? Top 5 vegetables of 2024.
At number 5, red cabbage.
You keep that shit. You can keep that shit. Anyway, Joe, how are you?
I'm doing good. I will have exciting news to share eventually on Sleepless about my own personal life. I'm just keeping it secret right now until things are official. But some good stuff is it's coming soon. But I mean, other than that, everything else, I mean, like, it's basically in Dom's domain as well. Event season, summer season, a lot of busy times for, whether it be an organization that, has kind of like, a mission to educate people, or, whether you're working in local government or nonprofit, park district, whatever it may be. Dom and I, we very much collide on, hey, 4th of July is around the corner. That means we got summer events coming basically that whole month. And like today at my job, we had our Independence Day event meeting, and it's a 2-day thing from, we have July 3rd, July 4th, and then even on the 5th, even though I'm not part of that, but even on the 5th, we have stuff going on in our city. And it was just a meeting going over all the details, going over any emergencies. God forbid something bad were to happen. I'm not even going to say it because I don't want it to come true.
Of course.
But, you can never be too careful in today's world. So, yeah, I mean, it's not only just busy in terms of getting everything ready. It's just busy getting everything, like, behind the scenes, in the future, in anticipation of. Oddly enough, we're reviewing Inside Out 2, but it is literally like the anxiety emotion kind of just taking control and being like, all right, what are all the outcomes that could potentially happen? We need to write an emergency plan in case of food poisoning were to happen, or
you gotta.
we can't launch fireworks because it's been hot for the past 2 weeks. We haven't gotten rain, and now the grass is dry. What do we do? So it's just stuff like that the whole time.
Break out the poppets.
Break out the poppets. There we go.
And it's like, you will never be appreciated if everything goes well.
Yeah, you won't. Just be like, great job, guys.
It's only when things go wrong is when there's going to be an HBO documentary going, and this dude fucked up. And
and that's when you're going to see me on the front cover, half of my face smiling in color, half the face black and white frown.
It's a still of you smiling, but it's tilted, and it's just
tilted.
slowly zooming in on you.
It's like the editor. It's like the role of the editor in the movie and stuff. Usually, the editor is unnoticed unless the editing's bad.
But yeah, no, I mean, overall, yeah, I mean, it's just been good. It's been a month now since I've graduated as well, and can't tell you enough that I don't miss it. Some people are like, "Oh, you're gonna miss the feeling." I'm like, no, What the hell was there to miss about being in a master's program? I miss college. I miss, doing this show sometimes from 12 a.m. to 3 a.m. Hell, it was easier to do in some cases because it was just like, well, hey, that's my night. I just get ready for that show. But like, like in today's world as an adult, like, I love doing this show, of course, and this is not me, like, this announcement I'm going to make down the line isn't me retiring from Sleepless, by the way. That's not it, because I know what this might sound like with where I'm going. But, with me being an adult, it's like, damn, like, gotta find time to see this one movie. I get lucky when I see 2 movies a week, let alone one that we're reviewing for Sleepless sometimes. Sometimes I cram these in last minute, so with something like Inside Out 2, where it's like I can go see it with friends or family opening weekend on a Friday, and it knocks it out to where the rest of my weekend, as well as Monday, Tuesday, I could just do whatever the hell I need to do. Dude, it helps so much.
That I believe. Without further ado, we can tackle Inside Out 2. Looking forward to when you do make that announcement, my friend. That'll be a good time on the show. I'll give you the floor probably to start the show on that one.
Yeah.
But Inside Out 2, the long-awaited sequel to Pixar's movie Inside Out, which I remember vividly seeing in theaters back in 2015. I remember, and it didn't dawn on me. Catherine and I rewatched the first one last week before the new one came out, and I saw that movie early. They actually had an advanced screening thing for it at AMC, and I saw that movie early, and it was a packed house. It was packed. I think it was sold out, and I remember that movie just being inspiring to watch and seeing the reactions of people all like laughing consistently. Like that felt, I don't want to be hyperbolic, because I'm honestly one of the few people I think that liked Finding Dory more than Finding Nemo. I don't want to say maybe the last great theatrical Pixar movie was Inside Out, because Soul technically didn't get a Pixar or didn't get a theatrical release. So I want to say it was like the last, I would say, complete knockout from Pixar. Inside Out 2, though, there was reason to be a little bit trepidatious with this sequel, I guess if for no other reason than Pete Docter, the director, who I've said for years is the creative genius behind Pixar. He really is. He's the chief creative officer. He's responsible for Up. He's responsible for Inside Out. He's responsible for, I think, some of the most emotionally affecting movies of the company, and also some of the most ingenious concepts of the movies. He's only a producer on Inside Out. He was the writer and co-director of the first movie, or the co-writer and director of the first movie. And it was fascinating to listen to him talk about the collaborative process of writing that screenplay, and his ideas and how it really took shape. This new one is directed by Kelsey Mann, and this is her directorial debut. The only thing that she's directed was this Monsters, Inc. short, Party Central. That was the only thing that she's directed, which is one of the more forgettable shorts that they've done. I'm not going to lie there. I can't remember even what it preceded. It might have preceded Inside Out, quite frankly. Now that I think about it, it might have preceded Inside Out. But first off, you can tell shit at Disney's bad. They don't even have shorts. They don't even have a short attached to this movie.
Okay, I was wondering if I was like, I know I adjust my time so that I skip the previews, but I'm like, shit, did I miss the short? I don't know.
You know what I hate to say, and it's because they're doing everything they can to bump up that catalog on their streaming service, but a lot of that stuff is now going to Disney Plus.
That's what I think.
Or a lot of those concepts, like Forky, like he has a bunch of shorts on Disney Plus. So a lot of those concepts that were going to be eventually used for like a short film have turned into like mini series of like 4-minute shorts on Disney Plus, and they release a whole season of them at once for you to turn on and have your kid be entertained for about like 20 minutes or something.
They haven't been especially memorable recently. Elementals last year, if you remember, was this really crappy Up short, Carl's Date.
Yeah.
Which I thought was a real bastardization way to do Up. And to make, like, after that movie and that beautiful movie, to then make it about the old man getting a date. I don't care if it was like 7 minutes long. It was still stupid. But Inside Out 2, though, really feels like an event unto itself. This is a movie, a high concept animated movie, a fantasy that really beams with color and life and imagination. And I think above all else, because it's not perfect, I don't think it's as good as the original Inside Out. Few movies are. But I think with this sequel, I think even because I've seen some people be more significantly critical towards this thing. And I guess I would say this. It might not do things completely different from the first Inside Out. It's structurally very similar. But what it does really well is the hardest thing it probably could have done. It was its biggest challenge, was to communicate anxiety and the effects of anxiety to young children and also make it relatable for adults. That's a hard thing to do. And I think this movie knocks it out of the park. I think the hardest thing this movie had on its plate, it accomplishes beautifully. And that's a big credit to the screenwriters, Meg LeFauve and Dave Holstein, for what they were able to do, not only with creating a character of anxiety that was believable, villainous, but also likable in a way, understandable. And I also think I'll talk more about it later too, but I also believe that when it's all said and done, Maya Hawke does an outstanding job as anxiety. I think is the voice. I think it's one of the best voice acting performances, if not the best that I've seen so far this year. That's how I'm setting the table for Inside Out 2. We'll go Dom and then Joe. General thoughts on Inside Out 2.
I very much enjoyed it, and I have had no doubt that this would do well in theaters, critically, and at the box office, simply because this is the most millennial coded, emotionally, conscious movie. The original was too, and that's why it resonated so well. This is just an not to say making movies is easy, but this idea, it feels so damn easy to just churn out ideas and stories and plot lines, right? It's such a straightforward idea that it's like, no, you stick to this. This is a little girl growing up, and all the metaphors are just in her head, and it's all visual metaphor, right? That's it. That's literally mechanically what it is. And it's life lessons in emotional development. And that, goddamn, how many times has Pixar made us cry since its inception? This was very much built for that. Did I cry at this movie? No. There were very strong emotional scenes, absolutely, and I appreciate them. And maybe this is just me getting older, right? But still, certainly, I very much appreciate it for continuing to honestly just make conscious these emotional concepts, such as, of course, anxiety, but other things too, such as staying true to your sense of self, and being conscious of the world around you, etc. But I'm just really glad that I'm just glad that Pixar was able to deliver something good. Because I'm definitely been at that stage now, and again, I'm older, right? So I'm not as into it with Pixar as I used to be, and I never will be, probably. And that's okay. But I'm definitely at that stage with Pixar. My relationship is like, okay, it's not a sure bet anymore. We're all a little bit nervous now. And maybe that was always going to happen inevitably, but this is certainly something I very, very much enjoyed with all of these new characters. And we can get into some critiques of those new characters, or at least how the movie handles them. But for now, very, very happy about this movie.
Yeah, I think everybody was a little burned by Lightyear. I think everybody was a little bit burned by Lightyear a couple of years ago.
That was the big one.
That movie still pisses me off. That movie, let
me say,
that's probably their worst. It's probably their worst.
It made me so sad to see the reactions from it. I personally just chose not to see it because I didn't have the time, and I'm like, I guess I'm not gonna spend any time on this. So I can't judge it. I cannot judge it. But
I watched it on a flight home with a couple of friends, and one of them was telling me, like, dude, I actually really enjoy that movie. Like, tell me what you think of it when it ends. And I just sit there and bite my tongue and be like, holy crap, man. And I'm like, this was bad.
I said I went back when I was writing my review Inside Out 2. I wanted to hyperlink my review of Lightyear because I briefly mentioned it in my review, and I went back and I love when I'm harsh, when I go back, and one of my opening line of the review is Lightyear isn't a compelling origin story, nor is it good enough to be Andy's favorite movie.
That's brutal.
That thing sucked. Joe, what say you though about Inside Out, a good movie? Inside Out 2, a good movie.
So when they announced that, Pixar, was going to start doing more sequels based on their franchises, it made me a little scared. Because we've known Pixar since we've been growing up to just do original movie after original movie after original movie. Very rarely did we get a sequel. Hell, we had to wait like, what, a decade to get Toy Story 3? We didn't even think that was going to happen, honestly, at one point as kids. We were just like, all right, it's just Toy Story 1 and 2. We now are in a new age of Pixar where it's half of it is original movies and half of it is sequels. And lately, I would say, like, as we were going into college, like our age group right here, you know, they started doing some sequels. They did Finding Dory. Steve, unfortunately, I'm not so hot on that movie. I'm sorry. I don't think it's as bad as everybody else makes it out to be sometimes. I think it's fine for what the movie is and everything. I do think Incredibles 2 is pretty solid. I wasn't crazy about Monsters University. And I never liked any of the Cars movies, so don't even get me started on 2 or 3. So there you go. So hearing that they were going to double down and start doing more sequels, I was like, well, I mean, like, honestly, the best sequels from you guys have just been really the Toy Story movies. Yeah, you know, like some of the other ones, I'm like, they're good. They're, you know, really good. But it's like, it made me concerned because the batting average was kind of like not that good, honestly. With Inside Out 2, I can safely say this. It is really good. It is definitely on that same level that I would put Incredibles 2, or even to like Steve's extent, Finding Dory, even how much he enjoys it and everything. Like, you know, because those movies I still think are well liked. It's just there is like some fair criticism towards them that I've seen often online. For me, Inside Out 2 is definitely up there. Even in like the top 10 of Pixar movies, because I just think it's no, not top 10, like top 15. If I had to put it, like, it's on the better half of the Pixar movies, I would say. And it's mainly due to what Steve was saying. It took concepts that, you know, are pretty deep, are pretty mature to teach a kid. And they not only made it entertaining for a kid to learn, they made it entertaining for us to learn as, you know, young adults or even older adults. You know, as I was saying,
who probably also need to see it as well. Who need to learn these concepts as well.
Who need to understand that, yes, anxiety is a real thing. It's so amazing to see Pixar is able to still do this. And Inside Out is like, I mean, that's just like even Don was saying, this is a setup for them to succeed, man. It's like, wow, okay, like they're literally, Pixar is going to take the idea of emotions, make it at a level that anybody can understand because they're aiming it towards kids, and they're going to knock it out of the park because that's what, you know, that they're so good at that. This brought me back as I was watching it, especially hitting those emotional beats. And I do have some criticisms towards this movie, but especially the emotional beats of this movie brought me back to thinking, now this is the classic Pixar I remember. Like, this is what, when I watched Soul, I was like, okay, that's the Pixar I know. I loved Turning Red as well. It was one of my favorite movies that came out that year, but I will admit, like, you know, it's not as good as some of the other Pixar movies. This, though, I was like, okay, this is more what I'm talking about. If they can keep doing this consistent thing, and if they want to make sequels and they could put this amount of level and detail into them, I'm down for that. And it really does, as we've been all saying now, it comes down to, yeah, the character of anxiety. I also agree. I think Maya Hawke does a fantastic job in this role. This is probably one of my favorite voice acting performances in any Pixar movie. I think she does incredible. And I think the character design of anxiety, I mean, the character designs for all of them, I thought were always great, even the original film. But these new emotions too, I really enjoyed them. The one thing I love about anxiety is that she's got like the frizzled hair, but also she has Muppet teeth compared to everybody else who has normal teeth, which just gives her that much more craziness look to her. And the way they animate her and everything, and how she like moves around, and how she is, you know, faster than most of the other emotions is great. I love how embarrassment, and funny enough, is the biggest emotion in the room. Like just kind of drawing more to that. It's all the animation in this movie, and all the little details they do, and little, like, you know, jokes like, you know, stream of consciousness and sarcasm and many other things too. I thought, like, hey, like, these are like, you know, these are on the nose, but the way you're animating it, it's really creative, and I'm actually really enjoying this. Like, I'm having a lot of fun watching it. I can get into critiques later, but that's why I'll stop there on positives. But overall, yeah, man, I really had a good time with this movie.
Somebody joked and said Inside Out 3 is going to be revolving around Riley in college, and she's not going to be, Joy's going to completely disappear, and nobody's going to know if it's because she's depressed, she's on birth control, or it's the state of society.
Exactly.
Oh, man.
You said it during 2016.
I thought that was fun. I thought that was funny, but yeah, everybody remembers the core five of the original cast. There was joy, sadness, anger, fear, and disgust. Initially, Pete Docter said it was going to be joy and excitement, but then they realized that they were too similar, so they had to come up with another one. And it was the one of the producers who said, "Do disgust. You need like an as if emotion." And that's how they came up with disgust. The new emotions are envy, voiced by Io Edebiri, who's having a hell of a run here the last couple of years.
Oh my God.
There's ennui, which I think is awesome that ennui is one of the emotions. And is like a disaffected French youth played by Adele Exarchopoulos. I butchered that name, but I said it confidently. Embarrassment is Paul Walter Hauser, even though he doesn't say too much. I think it's wonderful that Paul Walter Hauser is the voice of him. And then you have Anxiety, who's Maya Hawke. So those are your new characters. You have Lilimar, too, who's the voice of Val Ortiz. This is a hockey player that Riley looks up to, a high school hockey player. Because the whole movie's set at a weekend hockey camp, which is when also coincides with Riley hitting puberty. Also, this is totally random and not even worth mentioning. When the fuck did she become blonde? That was the first thing I noticed having rewatched the original Inside Out. She was brunette in the original.
Maybe it was like a dirty blonde.
I thought it was a dirty blonde too.
Okay, I'm colorblind. I am colorblind after all. Now the fear emotions running around in my head like, you colorblind son of a bitch. Anyway, though, no, I think the screenwriters here deserve a lion's weight of credit, Meg LaFavor and Dave Holstein, because they thoughtfully illustrate and personify these complex and often debilitating emotions, like anxiety. And you got to think the target audience is about Riley's age, younger and younger too. They're on the precipice, if they haven't already, of experiencing these kinds of feelings. And I think the position, the age of Riley was always interesting to me. She's 11 in the first Inside Out. That's an age you don't see a lot in movies. It's usually 10, it's 13, it's 15, it's 18. You don't get 11 very often. And 11's a weird fucking age. And then in this movie, she's 13, I believe. And so she's like right on the cusp. She's right, like just becoming a teenager, about to make that transition from middle school to high school, which is, as we remember, a fucking leap. You know, no matter who you are, it's a leap.
It's literally that summer between 8th grade and high school.
It really is. Like you get to high school, and as a freshman, everything is bigger. There's more kids. Oftentimes, it's just a different world. And I think that like taking place in that summer period was a really thoughtful thing.
I really feel like, oh, sorry, Dom.
No, go ahead.
I really feel like this is, they're teeing this up to be the next Toy Story trilogy for them, honestly. I think that because there's a lot of similarities I can see. I'm not saying like they follow the same story beats. It's just that Riley is kind of like this new generation's like Andy, I think. This is like
I think so too.
Like they're gonna watch her grow up and everything, and there won't be that connection of like she knows, like Andy has the toys physically, so there is that connection there. And that every kid that when we were growing up, we had toys, we played with toys and everything, so we have that connection as well. So there is that bit of a missing link there between like the characters of the emotions and Riley.
Sure.
But I think, damn, with both these sequels, they have sold me completely on how much these emotions really do care for Riley, man. That like both of like, that first one, yeah, I'll admit it made me cry, but this one I didn't cry either. But man, I was emotionally, I felt the weight of it. It was like, okay, like I get if someone does tear up at this and everything, because it's heavy and what's happening, and it is beautiful how it all wraps up in the end. But like, I think they really do demonstrate very well like how much these emotions really truly care about Riley, and it just makes it really makes like watching Riley grow up and everything she's going through. It makes it that you're much more involved because the emotions care that much about her and all the changes that she's going through too.
The very, very minor spoiler, but there's a point in the story where Joy has a breakdown effectively.
Yeah.
And that it's a very down point of the movie. And at that point, that is likely to be one of the places where people will be, you know, will may cry a little bit. Me in the theater, I was like, yep, I get it. Yeah.
Relatable.
100%. Yep.
And minor spoiler too. I think how it happens and how it builds is really the plot of the movie. What a brilliant illustration of a panic attack.
Yes, dude.
What a brilliant illustration of the mind during the panic attack scene. Like, I didn't cry during this movie either, but that scene and watching it build and like just when it starts to come to a head and it's really like the whole mind is freaking out over here and anxiety's going nuts, and then it just overtakes the control board like in the way that it does. I was profoundly moved by that.
Well, not even that, but like also cutting back to the real world, which like with this whole review we've been focusing on everything happening inside of Riley, but like cutting back to the real world and actually watching Riley, like we're seeing what's playing out in her head, but seeing her like having the panic attack outside, it's like, yeah, no, that's what it looks like. Like it's that bad.
And just freeze.
Yeah.
And just like completely freeze too. What like is ultimately right now the biggest moment of her young adult life. Just absolutely brilliant stuff. When we come back though, what I want to tee up for you guys to talk about too is the messages of these Inside Out movies are really great. And again, having rewatched the original movie last week, I came away, even, watching it, obviously I'm older now and everything. The movie nails both of these messages that it's trying to convey in a really big way.
Yeah.
And which is hard to do when you're dealing with emotions, and especially there's no real rubric for how they're doing it with these emotions. I want to tee that up for the discussion when we come back from a couple of minutes of our Zoom sponsored intermission. Enjoy some clip shows, or enjoy a nice clip reel that Joe has so thoughtfully put together on the new rebranded Sleepless with Steve. We'll be back in just a couple of minutes at Sleepless with Steve live on your Wednesday evening. Like his perspective too, and I like him on Shark Tank. Moreover, though, if we want to share any movie pass details, we can. I kind of gave away mine. You brought up the one of mine was that when they implemented that ticket verification, like his perspective too, and I like him on Shark Tank. Moreover, though, if we want to share any movie pass details, we can. I kind of gave away mine. You brought up the one of mine was that when they implemented that ticket verification thing where you'd have to take the picture of the ticket before seeing the movie. Oh,
I wanted to know, how were they verifying that? Literally manually? It had
That's
to
what
have
it
been
sounded
manual.
like from the documentary.
Hundreds of thousands of people sending pictures, and your job is to just look at these pictures.
Dom,
yeah, it looks like a movie ticket.
I wouldn't be surprised if it was a guy just going through, just hitting approve. He wasn't even looking at the pictures.
Probably just hitting approve.
It didn't make any sense because you would send in the picture and then like immediately be like, all right, you're good to go. It's like, wait a minute, but how does this work? Like,
how does it know?
Yeah.
How does it? And the other thing is too, there was even a few times where like if I would take a picture of the ticket, I'd put it on the counter right away from the ticket taker, but I would put it on the counter like once I get in the theater, I put it on the counter and I'd flip it off and I'd take the picture. And then sometimes I would I would shiver or something and it would be a little blurry and I'm like, fuck you, send, and it'd be like approved and it's blurry, you can't even read it. I'm like, fuck you.
It's manual. You're right. It's got to be manual because they weren't investing in anything. They weren't investing in any infrastructure, any other expert personnel other than these poor sons of bitches who had to sit there and do that shit. Oh my God.
It probably wasn't approved. It probably was a bank that it went to, like a support ticket bank. And they just had to hit approve constantly. That was one of the things I did though.
Control A. Accept. Control
The straw
A,
that broke the camel's back was the first time they tried to get me to pay an extra fee on top of the ticket. I'm like, you dumb sons of bitches. You should have just told me that my subscription was going up $10 a month. I would have stayed for that. But I'm like, no, this insidious kind of shit. And especially because too, this is the other thing. It's not like Stubs, which I have now. It's not like Stubs where I can go ahead from my house and buy the ticket for next week. That's generally what I do. I buy them a week in advance just so I can kind of know my schedule for the next week and the weekend. And I can cancel them super easy. I'm not putting any money down either. I already pay a flat rate of $20 a month. So that's why I do it. But my point being, though, is I can buy the stubs tickets from home.
Yeah.
With Movie Pass, it was location based. So you had to be at the theater. You could not get it from your house. You had to be in the literal parking lot of the theater because the app had to know that you were actually planning on seeing this movie. You weren't just erroneously trying to get the cost of a movie ticket loaded on this pay-as-you-go debit card. Yeah. That was the other part of it. So I'm like, I already, in order to use this thing, I have to go. I'm planning to go to the movie. I have to drive and go to the theater in order to buy the ticket from this service to begin with. And when I'm already here, that's when you're going to stick me with that $3-4 fee. Fuck you. Like that was really because that's when I remember like watching Ant-Man and the Wasp thinking like, why does this mortally offend me? And then I'm like, okay, this is why. Okay, I have reason. Why would I rather pay $20 a month than get charged $4 extra? And that's the reason. That's the pure and simple reason. It's not even like Uber, where Uber is just always a different rate every time, depending on conditions, traffic, time of day, time of night. It's not like that. It's a totally different concept.
Yeah, I mean, you kind of got mine during the review, but the movie I went to go see that was like 17 miles away was Sorry to Bother You, because for some reason, this was also something that was weirdly happening, is that certain theaters were blocking Movie Pass from seeing stuff at their location.
That happened, yeah.
I mean, like, again, I mean, there was like so many things too. I was thinking about this document, I'm like, man, they didn't even go over that. Damn. But yeah, I had to drive 17 miles because I wanted to see Sorry to Bother You, and I was just like, oh, I get to use Movie Pass, not realizing like, if I were to go see like a matinee show like right down the street, I would save money and gas, honestly.
Yeah. You're in the cult, bro.
Perspective too. Joe, thanks for everything you've done, including but not limited to the amazing rebrand you've given this show to make it look sterling and beautiful on the YouTube channel. It looks great. I guess the last thing I'll touch on, we had a really good discussion last week about the death of Morgan Spurlock and his complicated legacy. Highly recommend checking out that video that Joe was gracious enough to cut and upload as well on the YouTube channel. Check that out if you missed that, kind of recapping the death of documentarian Morgan Spurlock and the complicated legacy that he leaves after his death at age 53. Until then, next week we're reviewing Richard Linklater's Hitman. For Dominic Guanzon, Joe Viso, and yours truly, this has been Sleepless with Steve. Back and better than ever to Sleepless with Steve, live on this Wednesday evening. We're talking about emotions. We're getting in our feelings today with Inside Out 2. I wanted to tee up this going into this because we'll be getting into closing thoughts here in just a few minutes, but I want to go into this briefly, though. The thing that's really brilliant about the original Inside Out, because it revolves around, if you remember, if you haven't seen it in a while, it revolves around joy and sadness accidentally getting exiled from Riley's mind. And then Riley kind of falls into like a depressive funk because she just moved to a brand new state. She goes from Minnesota to San Francisco. And basically, joy and sadness have to find a way to coexist, because the movie starts with Joy continuously trying to put sadness in a literal corner so that she doesn't disturb Riley. And the whole message of the original Inside Out movie is it's acceptable to feel any and all of those emotions and how all those emotions can work together. And it comes together beautifully during the hockey game at the very end of the movie when Riley's going for a slap shot. She's skating down the ice and Anger's like, and like their emotions are talking in her head, and Anger's like, you want a piece of me, tough guy? And then sadness goes, we're embarrassing ourselves in front of mom and dad. And then Joy goes, not for long, goal gets scored. Like it shows how all the emotions beautifully work together. The thing about this movie, Inside Out 2, is that it does give anxiety the purpose of, if kept measured, can often lead to us being our best selves. One of the things that, like, it was like I think it was like in early college. I can't put up, date and time when I learned this, but over time I grew to know this. As somebody who's like anxious, I've never had diagnosed anxiety or anything, but I'm just an anxious person. I get nervous. I get like wired, and I get kind of like, jittery anxious. I started to accept my own nervousness a little bit better when I realized, like I looked inward and I realized it was often tethered to me wanting to do a good job at something and not wanting to fail, whether it was in school, whether it's at work for a project or something like that. Like I do all these interviews and stuff. You guys see them. I do all these interviews. I get nervous before every single one.
Yeah.
I get like I like sit in silence for about 10 minutes before I'm waiting for the phone to ring. I just sit in complete silence. I even turn the music down on the radio and I just sit in silence because it's like it's focus. And that's kind of how I use that energy. And that's what this movie teaches is really how anxiety, if kept measured, which is easier said than fucking done, believe you me, but it can often lead to us being our best selves. And I think these movies nail the themes.
Yes. In fact, I think what they do, anxiety is basically the main character in this movie, in my opinion. I really do think they are. Like, I think the idea of villainizing anxiety was going to be like what they were going to do here. And like, she is the antagonist in some way, but it's not like she's not doing anything really evil per se. She is trying to look out for Riley, and the stuff she's bringing up is like, hey, she's got a fair point and everything. But yeah, it's like what you're saying, she needs to be kept in check. It's
what we want out of every Marvel villain, right? It's like, just give me a good reason. Like, give me a reason to like why you're doing this.
And like there are moments in the movie where it's like it shows the bad side of anxiety, like using your imagination against you is a scene that they demonstrate here, and I think they do it really well. But they also show the whole things of, hey, anxiety does play into actually make you a better person. And it's because it makes you anxious if you're going to fail and you're going to try and make yourself better. There are moments like when anxiety pulls up like all the scenarios and she's like, hey, like, you know, if we want to get better, you know, we don't want to fail. So we have to get better at hockey and we have to do this. It's the same thing of being anxious for a test. Okay, if I fail, the anxiety of if I fail this test, I'm going to fail the class. So in order to combat that, I should probably go and study. And anxiety is driving that whole thing of making you want to study. They do such a great job at conveying that throughout this whole movie. And it could have been totally easy just to be like, yeah, anxiety, isn't that such a bad emotion, guys, and everything? But no, to actually make it be like, it's good that this is actually part of your life and why it needs to be there. And teaching it to a kid's level, like, that's amazing, man.
I just like how the emotions also feel other emotions at times. And it just adds to the complexity, right? They're not technically one dimensional.
Yeah.
Some of these like side characters can be certainly, but that's just, it serves the purpose of the plot, right?
Yeah.
And that's perfectly fine. One critique I would say of this movie that I do have is that it does run into the problem of like character explosion, like character bloat and float.
Yeah.
At times where it's like rapid fire going through these jokes sometimes. And I want to say that that's probably it drives the fine line between of expanding the world and bloat.
Yeah.
How do you balance those two? And I think it did a pretty decent job of doing that. Where it's like, okay, yeah, we went through a lot here in like half an hour so far, but you handled it pretty speedily. The metaphor here is already fairly not too deep if you think about it, for people in our age range and above. But that's okay. And that's all right, because the message here is really good, and it manages to drive home those points. It has the right points to make. Yeah. And I think it was fine at the end of the day, because you really just hone in on anxiety being the ringleader of the new emotions, and that's all right. Yeah.
A lot of the side characters are amusing. A lot of the side characters are amusing. The new emotions are mostly developed. I think if I had to really dig for one complaint, I think envy is a little muted for being such a powerful emotion. If you think about it, envy in general, the definition of envy, I think she's a little muted, and I think she leeches a little bit too much off of anxiety.
Yeah.
It makes sense in the way that they handle it, but I think envy is probably the one emotion, the new emotion that needs more development.
I felt like every emotion had a chance to shine in this movie, which is incredible to do with the large amount of cast of characters they have here. And even the small minor characters, like there's even a moment, it's my favorite joke in the movie, but they go inside like suppressed memories or locked away.
Yeah, there you go.
And there are some characters in that vault, especially one of them that involves a 2D animated character. I was laughing my ass off in the theater.
He was good. I know exactly who you're talking about.
But I do feel like Go ahead, Dom.
That's when I was afraid, like, oh no, is this going to get too much?
Yeah.
But then how they were able to do it was that they utilized alternative animation styles, and like, this is great. You did something really cool with 2D animation, with video games. You did something with like that. That was really,
Shadows
really
again.
cool to see. Yeah, absolutely. Like
Pixar and Shadows, man.
You don't see that in from Pixar too often.
Yeah.
Blending the animation styles, and how they did it here was really, really good. And as a certified gamer, that really made me laugh. They got like a YouTuber, they got like a video game YouTuber.
They did, to
voice that dude.
Yeah. And the thing I was gonna say is like Envy like is the only one. I mean, like we just mentioned like 2 other characters that you'll see in this movie that like I felt like they stole the scene in the movie like when they were there. But Envy the whole time, and it sucks because I love AO and I can't wait for the Bear season 3 to start up next week. She does a great job voice acting, but the character I felt like just had nothing to do really, and it's like everybody else had like something to do or a moment to shine that made them stick out, but not really Envy. The only other critique I had with this movie is mainly with its second act, and it's not that the second act is bad, but being that you're in the setting of Riley's head, you are retreading a lot of familiar ground, and it's like, okay, we're going to the back of the mind again, and it's just like we're doing this whole thing again, and we need to get back to the control room again before something bad happens. So it does have a little bit of familiarity, and it was like, damn, I really wish you could have found a way to like redo this. But the longer I thought about it, I mean, like this is a criticism I have, but it's not a big one to bring the movie down, because I really thought about it. It's like, I mean, shit, what could you do, man? You're inside of a head. Like, I don't know where else you're gonna go. Where else you're gonna go in the body as these emotions, really? Maybe in the third one they'll explore more of that. Maybe they'll do something more creative with the head. I'm hoping they do more things, and this is what I'm hoping if they make a third, and we can go into final thoughts, or unless if you guys have something else to say, play around with those islands a bit more. Because they do tease that Family Island is shrinking, and I'm wondering if that's being led to the third film for something.
That's college, right? That's going
that's
college
probably
again.
college, yeah. Like, you know, you disassociate with your family, you have this disconnect because you're going away and everything, and you're growing up into an adult or something, whatever it may be. I really do want them to play with the idea of those islands more, and maybe the emotions have to go visit those islands and figure out what the hell is happening here with Riley, like, you know, something like that. That would at least give us a new setting compared to like we're just traveling down the mine and like there's these pockets and everything, but going to these islands I think would be definitely that. Other than that though, I can go into final thoughts and whatnot, but if you guys have anything else you want to say.
I'm good.
Yeah, I'll just add, though, going back to the supporting characters really quick, I think the supporting characters do their job effectively, but nobody, well, I guess Anxiety, I definitely think Anxiety is probably one of the strongest characters in the whole series, but I will say of the supporting characters, because Anxiety is like a main character, the supporting characters, nobody's as good as Bing Bong from the original.
Oh, yeah, man.
Oh, God, freaking Bing Bong. Oh God, that made me cry. I think
revisiting that, man, he is the emotional center of that movie. He is the emotional center of that movie. One of the best probably on. If you were to make a top 25 best Pixar characters, he's on the top 25. What he means to the story and what he means in relatability, he's so good. Anyway, Joe, if you want to start us off with final thoughts, I'm all ears.
Yeah, Inside Out 2, it's an excellent reminder of why Pixar reigned supreme for so long. Their ability to approach topics and themes and make them entertaining and engaging for all audiences across all ages was their bread and butter for years. We saw it while growing up. I mean, I was glad to grow up during that golden age of Pixar and making tier lists of Pixars and ranking lists, which was a topic we actually did on Sleepless with Steve.
We did.
Today, though, it's harder for Pixar because now I feel like DreamWorks has really stepped up their game. Sony Animated Pictures and even Disney Animated Studios, which at a time Pixar was just considered to be the animation studio for Disney. But now when you get something like Zootopia, Frozen, Moana, stuff like that Disney can do on their own, it's like, hey, like, you know, there's competition out there that rivals Pixar. Lately, like sometimes some of their films don't stick out as much, like Lightyear or Luca for me. I know some people really like that movie, or even Elemental. I think it's a good movie. It's just, you know, it doesn't stick out as some of Pixar's best. But Inside Out 2 is exactly why we would get excited seeing that little lamp hop across the screen every time a movie started. For me, it is 3.5 out of 4 stars.
I'll go and then I'll leave it for you, Dom. Yeah, this is a message I think in this movie that's really difficult to communicate, and Inside Out 2 finds another way to illustrate mental health in a loving and non-judgmental manner that is communicable to kids and very entertaining and very relatable too for adults. I think this is one of those movies too that like none of us are parents, but I think like the old joke is that like, you know, kid sees a movie and wants to watch it, you know, 7, 8 times over and stuff. And Disney Plus makes that easier. I think Inside Out 2 is a movie parents might welcome showing their kids over and over again. I think it's that good. It's really that effective. And also as well, I think it's just a beautifully made movie, structurally, and just the wealth of characters that populate it. So it's 3.5 out of 4 stars for me.
Wow. Yeah. If you really think about what this movie can and has done in the wider discourse, I've known some child therapists that use those characters as like, hey, I use this as an exercise. I ask the kid to fill out a bubble every day, like color. How do you feel? Blue for sadness, you know, yellow for joy, et cetera, et cetera. Stuff like that. I'm like, in the wider discourse, Inside Out may very well be one of Pixar's most important franchise in that specific context, in that purview. And Joe, what you were alluding to earlier about how this could be the
next
Toy
Story for a generation.
Yeah, really, if you think about it, like, yeah, I totally get it. People are gonna be growing up with this kid, with Riley, a girl that's really, really cool. And for that alone, I think it deserves like a 3.5 out of 4 stars. But how this movie executes that, I'm very, very happy for it. And even at the pace that it was going on, where at times it seemed almost too fast, or the characters seemed almost too much, you sit back and go, man, it's like looking back at the most refined stage production where it's like, how did this not fall apart? That's incredible. That's so cool. All the things that were falling apart behind the scenes, like South Park, how South Park used to get made in 6 days. Like, how did this become one of the best episodes ever when things were just so slapdash at the last minute? No, a 3.5 out of 4 stars. This was great.
Really great discussion, guys. We will move forward, briefly touch on this. I do want to give this a little bit of time because we mentioned it about a month ago, and there's been not totally an update, but a bigger, more deep dive on it. It's less a news story now, and it's becoming more of a feature, really thanks to this excellently made Variety piece by Adam B. Very. It has to deal with the Blair Witch Project actors, which we talked about a couple of weeks ago. I'm friends with Joshua Leonard on Facebook, so I saw when he posted this initially, this whole thing of calling out Blumhouse and calling out the studio behind the Blair Witch Project as well, which was Artisan Entertainment at the time, for not giving them their royalties and really not getting due compensation for a movie that was generationally effective, made hundreds of millions of dollars, and is still an ensuing cultural staple that now has a sequel and a soft reboot made since then. The title of the article is called "The Blair Witch Project Actors Call Out quote unquote reprehensible behavior after missing out on profits for decades." This is an exclusive to Variety by Adam B. Very. What basically Adam B. Very did was he got the 3 actors, Joshua Leonard, Michael C. Williams, and Ray Hance, formerly Heather Donahue, all together on Zoom to talk about exactly what they are demanding from Artisan, now Lionsgate, and Blumhouse, mainly Lionsgate, because Lionsgate really just came to an agreement with Blumhouse to try to reboot the movie again and make another movie. And it's coming up on the 25th anniversary of Blair Witch. This is the 25th anniversary year of that movie. So basically the 3 actors wrote an open letter to Lionsgate on April 20th requesting quote unquote meaningful consultation on any future Blair Witch related projects that would likely result in the use of their names and faces, and requesting retroactive and future residual payments for the movie, quote unquote, equivalent to the sum that would have been allotted through SAG-AFTRA had we had proper union or legal representation when the film was made. The key point to understanding this is you have to go back to when the Blair Witch Project was made and released. We were young. So when we learned about this, the buzz was long over. But basically, in 1999, the internet wasn't what it was today. This was a movie made on a shoestring budget that got 3 basically theater actors involved in the production of this movie. They were given cameras and they were given a script outline for what they had to reenact in the woods. And it was the producers and the people, the very few people, limited crew members behind it that were making those sort of stick figure things and hanging them throughout the woods and kind of giving them a guided map on where to go. When the movie premiered at Sundance Film Festival, it was passed off as a real life student movie. And the actors had to go into hiding pretty much after the movie came out for about 9-10 months because it had to make it look like they were missing and presumed dead. Well, obviously, consequently, then they thought, well, we're going to go into hiding. This movie's going to get acquired, which it did by Artisan Entertainment. We're going to get money from this then eventually because they can't work.
Yeah.
They can't really work. They can't work in the entertainment industry, rather, at the time. One of the most moving parts of this long piece is when Michael C. Williams, the actor who plays Mikey in the movie, they all play their real character names. Love my webcam going out right now. He says, though, and he quote, "I'm embarrassed that I let this happen to me." He said, "You've got to put stuff away because you're a fucking loser if you can't. Because everybody's wondering what happened, and your wife's in the grocery line and she can't pay because a check bounced. You're in the most successful independent movie of all time, and you can't take care of your loved ones." And that's really I think the most powerful part of this whole thing is that it's really, I think the most shocking is like how they didn't come out after the most recent reboot and they had the restraint to still, or they didn't feel like it was the time to come out, or they really didn't think that they would have the power and the movement behind them to do so now. The sad part, which is also noted, I was going to try to find it here really quick, with the is when they were talking to a representative for SAG-AFTRA, the author of the Variety piece, Adam B. Very. He says it's complicated, this situation, because he said he's hopeful that the performers will achieve some compensation, but when there is no union contract covering the production, the actors in the union are generally limited to appealing to fairness. And of course, Lionsgate representative declined the comment for the story, as well as former executives at Artisan Entertainment, which I doesn't exist anymore either. So I don't know what's going to happen with this, and I'm afraid it's not going to be much. It's not going to be to the just due or satisfaction of Ray Hance, Michael C. Williams, and Joshua Leonard, which really sucks because I can't imagine doing something like that at a really young age. You got to think they were in their early 20s when they did this. They were younger than us when they did that movie. Struggling post-college kids that were thinking that, like, to see this movie rake in hundreds of millions of dollars and become a cultural phenomenon while they're struggling to make rent. And they're the three behind it. And then the sequel comes out 2 years later. They don't get any money from that, even though they're using archival footage from the Blair Witch Project.
Yeah.
Then Blair Witch comes out, which was a total secret production, as we talked about last time on the show. That was a total secret production. That movie comes out. They're in that movie in archival footage too. They don't get anything. They don't even get a fucking call that says that they're going to be doing this movie. It's shocking. I guess it shouldn't be shocking, but I guess the gall of these studios is really appalling. And I hope that something comes from it. I don't know if anything will, though, because the SAG-AFTRA compensation that they're seeking was something that had to be done for legal reasons on the production of the movie. And that didn't happen clearly. And I don't know if there's a way to remedy that. We'll go Dom and then Joe for commentary on this.
Yeah, I don't really have much hope from a legal standpoint. This whole play by the three. It's good. It's great that they're coming out now. But I feel like enough time has passed where, and asking for legal representation, it's really more so a play to the general public. We're not expecting anything to come from the studios that they're actually talking, that the letters and stuff were seemingly talking to, they're really talking to the general public just to get some public sympathy and maybe get to kind of like leverage them in that position, which again, if that's the best you can do, that's the best you can do. Because it's a damn shame. And Steve, you mentioned earlier that They didn't even have the backing. They didn't feel the confidence to do this even in 2016, which is a bit ago, but still. And that makes perfect sense considering the environment at the time. But here in 2024, they absolutely do. So I really can't comment too much more from this other than shout out to Variety for featuring this this article. But I will say that this is this specific story of these three and what they're doing right now is a really interesting knockoff effect of the labor movement that we've been seeing in the past several years with the WGA, with SAG-AFTRA, and just in general, this kind of class consciousness, et cetera, et cetera. And I don't mean to get academic, but I'm saying, like, you're right. If they didn't feel this way in 2016 and not in every year subsequently, what makes it about it now in 2024 that gives them the courage to do this? It could be other things, like maybe they're more desperate. I really hope not, but maybe there's some things in their personal life, financially or what have you. I forget if they mentioned it in the story. That could be a thing that does happen. But I really think it's just the wider consciousness of like, hey, let's re-examine how we like compensate people for their creativity and their labor. They're more abstract labor.
It could be also, I mean, the most recent strike was about, you know, the use of AI and everything and the images used of people without their permissions and everything. So it could have been like, hey, you know what? Everybody was out and about protesting about this. Maybe this is our time to finally bring it up, because we're now in an age where it's like, yeah, like, you know, people can be scanned into movies and without their permission and everything. And they just appear on the screen and whatnot. Like, you know, Scarlett Johansson, one of the biggest actresses of all time, all of a sudden is now just an AI generated image on the screen and whatnot. So maybe that's.
Well, they hired a voice alike. That's okay.
Oh, yeah. Anyways, Dom, sorry I cut you off.
No. I mean, that's exactly my point, where it's just re-examining how we use people, use their likeness, and use their efforts. And how do we compensate that? And that's a really, really, I mean, in some ways it's not difficult when you look at the money that they're bringing in, but it does generate that discussion. And I'm very glad that we're having that now in the wider discourse. And this Blair Witch story is certainly it's so influential. Literally, you can trace back so much found footage, just to any discussion of found footage, that style, alternate reality games, etc. You kind of have to mention Blair Witch. That's just how big it was for filmmaking. Kane Pixels and the back rooms, etc. It really goes all back to there, and it's astounding that the knockoff effects from that.
Yeah, I won't add too much more to this because I know we'll be bleeding, or we're already bleeding in the Sleepless OT. But it sucks to see this happen to them, and it sucks that, like, you know, once again, like, their image is being used without their permission. They're not being compensated for it, which is even the worst part about it too. And the studio will make the movie for a very low budget, like the Blumhouse did. There's a fly in my room. And they'll make millions upon millions of profit, and it's like, man, you can't give them anything of that. Like, you can't compensate them for what they've done. And I remember the last article we brought up, I forgot which one said it of the three, but he was like, you guys haven't made a good sequel to any of the movies. Let us come in and do something, and we can actually, like, you know, probably bring this back to where you guys are looking for it to do, like, in terms of profit and everything. And he has a point. Maybe they got something up their sleeve. They are the original creators. That would probably interest people way more in a Blair Witch sequel or reboot than anything else. Because, yeah, like, everything we've gotten, including that fucking video game that sucked, was just like, oh, dude, this doesn't capture what that movie did. It doesn't give me that same fear. And I did think the reboot from Blumhouse was okay, but it was just like, it was nowhere near the original and everything. And hearing what's happening now, it's like, oh, well, then I'd rather just not even have this reboot at all, if that means that these guys aren't getting anything that's due to them. And I'm glad too, they are serving this article kind of as a please don't do what we did type of thing to, you know, future filmmakers who want to go off and do something as big as what the Blair Witch was for them early on in their career. I think it's great that, like, you know, they are taken that message and they're trying to get it out there more than ever now. I'm especially glad, and the whole article is littered with images of them standing together. I'm glad to see they have a tight support group
That's
because
so
it's
cool.
just it just means like, dude, yeah, because like reading the stuff like where he couldn't go to where his wife went to the grocery store and couldn't pay for the groceries and everything, and then he has a breakdown on camera. It seems like, as the article describes, and the two immediately got his back and everything. That is a tight group of friends who you've all been through something as traumatic, even I would describe this, as what's happening to all three of you when it comes to this movie. And at least you have all stuck by each other's side. It wasn't like you guys went, and maybe at some point this was the case and you've come back together, but if that's the case, then glad you guys came back together. But it seems like it didn't happen where it was like, well, I told you guys, we should have never done this, we should have done this, and then like
Infighting, right?
Yeah, and then you guys have a big fallout. It's great to see that like they've stuck together, and I think all three of them being together, it's even what's helping pushing this message out even more.
I completely agree. I think the unity of the three of them is really something to behold too. I think the other thing that the Variety article nails too is the fact that part of what's made this really traumatic for them, mainly Heather Donahue, now Ray Hantz, who went through a period of time where she almost committed suicide, is also the fact too that like, you got to remember they used their real names in the movie. And so there's an inextricable authenticity to that movie. They're playing themselves and they're referred to by their same name. And then allegedly what happened was the movie was supposed to be conceived about like the legend of the Blair Witch, and the footage of them in the woods was only supposed to be like a 30-minute part of the movie. And it was mainly
really?
It was going to be a mockumentary on the legend of the Blair Witch. But then they said when they started seeing early posters that looked like missing posters of the three of them, they're like, is this going to be the whole fucking movie? And in the beginning of the Blair Witch, I don't know how recently you guys have seen it. It's probably been about 8 years for me, but
way too long.
The first 10 minutes is like the mockumentary setup of like their neighbors and friends talking about them disappearing. And then it's the footage that was found.
It's like Late Night with the Devil, where they had that opening documentary.
Pretty much. You have the opening context, and then you have the movie, which is what they shot too. The last thing I'll note too is that in an interview with the Philadelphia Inquirer, Ray Hantz said she said something like, "I'm the poorest famous person in America right now," and this was back in the day. She said, "I'm the poorest famous person in America." Then she added, "Artisan reached out to me to tell me that I can't say that."
Oh.
It sucks. I want to still follow this story. I just don't know how much resolve is going to come from it, especially to their satisfaction.
The best case scenario is like is going to be, they're not suing them, right? It's just an open letter. So
it's an open letter.
Yeah. At this point, the best thing that Lionsgate can do is a show of goodwill, which will make them look good, right? So they're appealing, hopefully, to be like, hey, Lionsgate, you can look like a real good guy if you can, compensate us a little bit. But the truth of the matter is that legally they don't have any case at all, because it's just asking for niceties at this point. Between asking niceties or demanding just in a public outrage kind of sense, which I get the tactic. So I don't have much hope for it. Hopefully we can carve out a happy ending. And you know what? Even without the quote unquote happy ending, the three did stick together, having that solidarity. They found a way. And in that sense, I'm very happy for them. Because it could have wound up much worse for a group of folks in Hollywood to turn against each other. So, yeah.
I agree. That's our show tonight, Sleepless with Steve. I think we did this last year in a similar fashion too, so this isn't going to be too new. The original plan for next week was I was going to be out. I was going to be out anyway next week, and these two gentlemen would take over the show. Joe, you've got sort of a later rising obligation, so what we've decided to do before the show today, there's going to be no show next week. And I already gave us the 4th of July holiday off because I know that's a hugely busy event time, mainly for you two. Not so much for me, but mainly for you two. So we will be back here in 2 weeks. So we're going to have a 2 weeks summer sabbatical here. We will be back here in 2 weeks on July I take that back. July 10th is the date we will be back. And do we know what we're reviewing on July 10th? Maxine,
the trilogy.
Baby. Maxine, baby. Cannot wait. Me and Catherine are so excited for that movie.
I just realized I
Probably
was
one of my-
muted the whole time, and I was like, bro, I can't wait to see Maxine.
Just for that part. Yeah, it's okay.
So excited for Maxine. I don't know if it's necessarily the conclusion question mark yet, but it is the third movie in Ty West's X trilogy. Obviously, we had X and we had Pearl in 2022. Yeah. We've got Maxine, which is probably top 3 most anticipated of the year for me. Mm-hmm. So I cannot wait for Maxine. That will be our next review on July 10th. So until then, we're taking our little summer sabbatical. Appreciate you tuning in. As always, we will be back very refreshed and ready to go in the dog days of summer to review Maxine. But until then, for Joe Viso, excellent job on that rebrand. I'll keep saying that. God. Dominic Guanzon, always showing up in that trademark polo. And yours truly, who's happy to be here. This has been Sleepless with Steve.